Get started. First and foremost, let me welcome everybody back to the Zoom campus of Widener University, African American Studies. We have now, which is hard for me to believe, we have for the last few years launched what we call Ngoma Conversations, as many of you all know, and Ngoma is an East African word for drum. And here we have a series of speakers, presenters, lecturers from all over with a wide range of topics for and about African people, both here and in the diaspora. And I promise you, we're going to have a pretty fun lineup this year. We tend to keep things, in people's head. We tend to meet the third Mondays of the month during the common hour for us, which is lunchtime, although it's typically filled with meetings as well. And we hope to continue to build community this way. And I should say Eastern Standard Time, because we're being joined by folks in other time zones. And so I am going to put my PowerPoint up. I see friends there. I see people joining us from Jamaica. Hey, Cherry, how you doing? Good to see you. Typically in Jamaica, I could be wrong about that. Where is my PowerPoint when I need it? Hold on one second. Share screen. We're going to rock and roll. That's what happens when you post on Facebook. You get folks come in, family, friends coming from all over. All right, let's get busy. All right, I can see your face, Charmaine. Can you see the slides? The PowerPoint is up. Rock and roll. All right, folks, we're gonna get busy. Like I said, I'm excited to kick this off. And I wanted to start off by just giving thanks to, as we tend to do at the beginning of the season, for Dr. David Lehman and his support, particularly for funding. We give a small stipend to speakers, which it's not so much that people need the reward, but we like to reward people for their work. And so by him allowing to do it, and provide the revenue stream for us, it sweetens the pot. Now, I don't mean myself, because I'm faculty here, I get paid regardless, but when we have outside speakers, and we tend to have quite a few of those, so we're always thankful. And I want to just recognize particularly in criminal justice and African American studies, new colleague, Dr. Kalfani Toure, and he's assistant professor in criminal justice and African American studies. And he presently this semester, for this first semester here, is teaching in the African American Studies minor, African American history for us. And I just wanted to welcome him. And as people here at Widener know, I've been around here for a long time. I'm presently the director of the undergraduate social work program. And for the last 4-ish years, time kind of flies, I've been co-coordinator of African American Studies, and I was just given a month ago baby pictures of myself that I've never seen. Our home was destroyed in a fire, and we had a relative give me a picture. So I said, well, you get me now, and there I was many years ago. I've been here at Widener for 25 years in many capacities, but mainly as a clinical professor in social work. And I've been teaching either 30 or 31 years. Sometimes you have to go and check your own resume. 25 years have been here at the center, as we say, at the Pride, and celebrating my 40th year with a master's degree in social work. And actually, I made it to 65 years on the planet. And maybe we'll do a Medicare presentation some other time. Some general disclaimers. I think it's always good just for people to get a sense of at least where I'm coming from, or what we're attempting to do here. You certainly will hear my personal opinions and about things in this presentation. Not all African people have the same opinion, and not all non-African people have the same opinion. So what we're interested in this format is the discourse, is an emerging conversation and dialogue, historical conversations and dialogue. So I just want to indicate for the record, I have always been open to other points of view, and certainly in this presentation, I am as well. I have an anti-violence perspective. You may hear me say some things here that express a viewpoint, but as a human being in the world, I typically do not endorse violence. However, he says, this is where the comma comes in. I am of the school of thought that in this instance, anyone, but I'm talking about African people, have a right to protect and defend themselves against violence. And I'm going to quote Malcolm X, although I don't think on the record he has any record of actually doing it, but I'm going to quote him. It's just easier. By any means necessary. So I just want that to be clear. Typically, as my mother would say, don't go out and start violence in the world. But if someone comes to you, you protect yourself. You do what you have to do. You're going to see some real scenes here. And oftentimes we talk about this kind of stuff through what is now referred to as a trauma-informed lens. However, I would argue intellectually and otherwise that African people on this soil have been a prime developer of the language of a trauma-informed lens for the last 400-year plus through life experience. So even when people weren't touting a pedagogy or andragogy or framework for trauma-informed, many of us culturally were living it. But you are going to see some real scenes here as it relates to the topic at hand. So whatever you need to do to prepare yourself, feel free to do so. I have been for many years a very clear proponent of a culturally centered perspective. And as has been said by others, part of it means is looking at the knowledge and the source and the framework of what we teach. And oftentimes there's been a perspective, always there, but often not identified. Some call it Western, some call it Eurocentric. Many like Dr. Malefi Kete Asante and hundreds of others now have helped to define that perspective. But I am a proponent of being very clear about the knowledge and the source. And I guess for the last, 35 years or so, I've been a clear proponent of an African worldview and an African-centered perspective, juxtaposed or compared to what are referred to as Eurocentric paradigms and frameworks. So a few weeks ago, cascading on my social media and happening in the world, there was a major incident, at least for African people and for others, that got called many things as it was kind of evolving and happening, videotaped and sent across the globe. I'm referring to it here. It has other names as the Montgomery Riverfront Brawl or Insurrection. Insurrection for me is a reframing of it. In the context of this talk or this conversation are moments of African resistance found in redemptive joy. Just a little bit about what we're attempting to do here. I'm not going to read it in African American studies, but oftentimes we make a conscious effort to ground the discourse, the conversation, the awareness, the worldview in the experiences of African people. We don't have all the same experiences, but we certainly have a cultural orientation to the histories, her stories that we've experienced, not just in this on this soil, but in the world. And so oftentimes we're speaking from that platform. I also want to acknowledge a brother that I've never met and do not know, and probably just because I'm curious, certainly will explore as best I can his history and legacy here. His name is Dr. Eugene Sparrow. He was the first African-American professor, at least indicated by the Widener websites and materials. Race is a funny thing. People can have ancestors that are Black, and we don't know it because they didn't share it because they passed, et cetera, et cetera. But at least in the Widener record, he is credited as the first African-American professor to teach at, our predecessor named institution, PMC, in 1968. And, you don't have to be a genius to at least go back in history and look at what might have been going on in this country and in the world. It's curious to me that he was hired to come and teach in 1968, and he was the first one recognized. He taught sociology and focused on social problems in Black culture. Now, don't get this twisted or confused. That is not when Africana studies started at Widener. It would start many, many years later. He was also one of the founders of Project Prepare. I did know his predecessor, Dr. Alonzo Cavan, who was very instrumental in the program as well. And they assisted thousands of lower income students earn college degrees. Nationally, when we look at the start of Africana studies, Black studies, we look at Dr. Nathan Hare on the West Coast. And he coordinated the first Black studies program in the United States in 1968. And there are many other innovators. I just want you to play around with those dates, though. It's curious to me that in 1968, Widener University, PMC, brought his first Black professor to the campus. Look at what he taught. And it shows that rippling kind of effect of that social agency, that resistance, that movement that even rippled right here, the Chester. Black studies or Africana course more broadly are interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary approaches to studying and understanding the experiences of African people and African descended people across the diaspora. Why this topic? The Montgomery Riverfront Brawl, Insurrection, Moments of African Resistance found in Redemptive Joy. It cascaded or rippled, at least for me and others, across the world. And when you start to look at the research on the subject matter, it made me begin to look at the construct or the idea or the notion of joy, actually written in a phenomenal book that I am reading as we speak by the writer here, Tracy Michelle Lewis Giggets. And let me see if I can put her up here. And if not, if you haven't read this book, I'm reading it now as we speak. It is a phenomenal read. Of course, let me give it a second to open. It's loading. That's the joys of technology. Let me see if I can get it to load. There we go. And a lot of times you guys can't see it, so I have to reshare, which I'm going to do. It's funny how we've all gotten so much better with Zoom. There it is. If you were to say to me, hey, Richard, what's the one book that I need to write? When in doubt, and again, I told you I was going to give you all my opinion. When in doubt, go to a Black woman. You want to understand something in a deeper prophetic way. Phenomenal. I'm reading the book. I've seen her give 2 or 3 talks on the book. And now I remember 2018, 2019, when it subliminally, I caught wind of it and must have seen her talk about it, because it filtered, the construct of Black joy filtered its way into my spirit and into my thinking when what was going down in the world. When I saw youthful Black responses, African-American responses to the brawl in a youthful, jubilant kind of way, it made me say, hey, we need to be talking about this in African-American studies, and not 10 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 3 years from now, as we often do in academia, because we have to gather research, develop the idea, yada, yada. We need to do this now. So if you want the one book that I think is going to do it for you, it's this one. Although she's written 18, 19 books, and I'm about to become a big fan of hers. This book got a lot of awards, NAACP awards and elsewhere. And again, I've seen her speak on several platforms now, and she's prolific. She's phenomenal. And so I'm going to encourage you to do that. You're going to think that I'm getting royalties on the book, but I'm not. So if you want the one book that I think you should take a serious look at, that would be the one. And you should be seeing my regular screen again. Black Stories, Resistance. And I'm going to play a clip of her just for a moment, but several chapters to the book, she grounds it in her own experience of having lost 2 family members who were shot and killed in a church by a white racist, shot and murdered. And the way in which she provides a narrative of the history of joy and Black resistance, tying it into oppression, is just absolutely brilliant. And I think when you see the interview that she does, actually I'm going to play a little bit of it now, it'll put into context everything that I'm trying to do in this presentation.
My daughter has taught me so much about joy. I wrote Black Joy because I myself was learning how to identify what joy felt like in my body. It took me some time to realize that my joy, our joy, kind of sat in this container of what some would call trauma. Maybe the traumatic.
Of course it stopped. Hold on one second. That's what happens when you lose something.
My daughter has taught me so much about joy. I wrote Black Joy because I myself was learning how to identify what joy felt like in my body. It took me some time to realize that my joy, our joy, kind of sat in this container of what some would call trauma. Maybe the traumatic experiences that Black folks have experienced, especially in this country, has amplified our joy in a way, but it's always been a part of us. It is an indicator of our humanity. It's a powerful legacy that we have. Yes, Black joy is resistance. It's a way to say, when you kill us, you can't kill us. But maybe even more than that, Black joy is our healing. These deeply personal essays ultimately point to that, right? Our restoration as individuals and collectively as a people, I think, relies on our ability to access, identify, amplify our joy. I didn't know how to access joy. I'd gotten to this big age and not paid attention to what it felt like in my body. And as a Black woman living and working in and around institutions rooted in white supremacy, it's easy to lose that. And so part of writing this book was about discovering what that was. And so as I'm writing this book and I'm thinking about how historically, culturally, Black joy shows up, I'm also experiencing that myself. This book is not just about what we hashtag as Black joy on social media, although I'm here for it, to be clear. I'm here for images of us laughing, dancing. Running a Boston in a spades game. But also, I know there's more to it. And so I wrote this book because I was curious about what lives just underneath all of that. And, I wanted to explore the complexities, the nuances of what we call Black love.
I think I'm going to move it on, but she goes into further detail. And actually, just in the interest of time, but that should give you kind of a cultural, intellectual, beautifully written frame of reference for just as human beings, but in this case, certainly in Africana studies, that we should be looking at Black joy. We can't just look at the angst and the pain of the realities that we may live in. Just because in the interest of time, and I'm happy to share the PowerPoint, which I can put it in a platform that you'll be able to see it and use it. Just wanted to give you a context. So again, about a month or so ago, there was a major incident in Montgomery, Alabama, where you have a cruise ship, the Harriet, and a group of folks were in this cruise ship having a wonderful day, and one of the ship's co-captains, they pull up to a dock and they find that there's a boat, kind of parking in their space that they have assigned. And the riverboat co-captain attempts to negotiate with people who happen to be Caucasian or white, in regards to that space. And, ultimately they assault and attack him, which becomes, this major melee. I'm going to show you about 2 minutes of this clip. It's loading. Now it's not loading. Hold on 1 second. I tell you, the wonderful tech difficulties. I ran this thing 3 times and it worked, of course. Let me just see if I can get it to run one more time. And if not, I know people have a frame of reference. There was just something I wanted you to see. No, it's not gonna cooperate, which is all right. He, at the beginning of what becomes the larger fight, he tosses his hat. And ultimately, there are other individuals that come to his assistance. There's a large, that on that boat, it's a large group of largely African American people who've kind of spent the day on that ship, and they had a tour, and it's really a large group of them. And they watch as their ship's co-captain begins to negotiate. He gets assaulted, and they're still trying to pull in the boat as he gets off. And as we know, one of his co-workers, who's a young male, 17-ish, 18, 17 years of age, he jumps in the water to go assist. And we see other African Americans. There are video accounts of this all over the place. Everybody has a cell phone these days, and they are videotaping, but they're also calling out, they're rapping, they are chanting, they are supporting, they are women and men. And I need to just say for the record as well, I mean, while it appears that a large group of the supporters are African American, there are also several individuals who are white who attempt to provide assistance. There's a young male, either co-worker, and he gets pushed away in a very aggressive kind of a way. And it becomes this kind of a huge melee and story. And, we're familiar with the we that I'm referencing in this case is, African Americans, but it's part of these assaults on Black existence are part of what this writer talks about. They're 400 years in the making of our seeing from nearly existing Black people attacked, killed, harmed, beaten, lynched, etc. I don't have time to show you the whole piece because I'm going to stop talking in 10 minutes and take questions. But there's this backstory, and certainly those of us who are a certain age from our own life experience, and then as academics or teachers or human beings, we may be more literate and very clear about this history. And yet this time, at least in this narrative, because this isn't only the first time that we win, so to speak, but we don't get killed. This time there's a shift, and I'm showing you some of the monuments in Alabama, in Montgomery, that kind of capture some of this history in the statues. And then these are a group of people that were discussing it and talking about it in Alabama. There's a historical context that I don't have time to go into, of looking at moments of African resistance in many forms, documented throughout the history, that oftentimes are not talked about. I'm interested, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. I'm interested in the redemptive joy, what I call redemptive joy aspect of it. You saw the other writer thinker who really captured it culturally and historically. And when I saw those images on TikTok and social media, they were cascading. There's just a range of so many comments. It's when they talk about Black social media or Black TikTok, there's this sphere. And I'm happy to be in it as an older person myself. It's one of the smarter decisions that I made. Like, let me figure out how to be on, TikTok. Or I remember some years ago when Barack Obama was running for president, I wasn't on Facebook. I was like, I don't have time for that. I'm not interested. When I heard that Barack Obama had a presence on Facebook, I joined. And now I have forced myself as an older person to learn at least how to get on social media, how to have a page, but more importantly, how to discover and to see other people, other young people, other older people, as many of us have. There are large numbers of college students who use this medium, in particular African Americans and younger people, and it's a huge phenomena. Again, I can provide the PowerPoint to you. There's a large communication or cultural kind of profiles of how often, and again, my focus here is African American people, but how often they use the platforms. Huge marketing numbers, huge. It's also opened me up as a teacher, as a college professor. It's opened me up to think about what are the appropriate uses in classrooms to kind of bring this in, instead of only saying to young people, put your phone away. Put your phone away. Put it away. You're driving me crazy. Put it away. So now I've tried to incorporate it, both. Put your phone away, and here's some times that you can use it. One of the things that came out of Boston University was a series of very well-written discussions on the history of Black resistance and what it means to this faculty and to this group. Really well done. And again, I'll be happy to, let me just see if it opens. Because I'm rushing a little bit. Hold on, it's still opening. Oh, there it is. Okay, let me just make sure you can see it. Wait a minute. Back on share screen. Again, I'm more than happy to share the PowerPoint. Actually, I'll share it to the group. If you're a member of the Ngoma Conversations, I'll put it in there as a PDF. That's the most manageable way. And it looks at this legacy of what Black resistance means. So remember, I'm curious about it. We all are. I'm also curious about Black joy. And they do a really, many members of their community of African Americans in different capacities, even students, they're quoted about what it means, and you get a range of it. And I say it not to tout Boston University, because I work at Widener, but I think it's something that we could do here for things that interest us, and they tie in both student responses and faculty and staff. And I think it's a beautiful way to do it. And I think, given that we have the largest incoming class of freshmen and transfers at Widener, one of the most diverse classes, I think there's some real opportunities here. But I just wanted to show it, just in terms of resistance means it's a vital trope of Black life. The focus on Black resistance centers my attention on the success and triumphs of Black people against oppression. The conspiracy of forgetting must be exposed, resisted, and defeated. Being a Black student at a PWI is a form of Black resistance. Black resistance is not just something we do, it is who we are. To resist is to work towards a collective rebuilding, the articulation of a new vision. I need to tell you, I've tried to get a couple of these folks as speakers for the Ngoma series. I'm still working on it. I think I have one of them, and that includes students as well. Sometimes they want a little bit more than what we can offer in terms of reimbursement. Black resistance depends on Black history, withstanding oppression while maintaining an outlook of hope, remaining preservant and striving for a better world. That's Black resistance. Black resistance requires both knowing and sharing Black stories. I'll just do two more. Black joy, there it is. Black joy is Black resistance. Black communities and individuals get to decide for themselves what constitutes resistance. Just in the interest of time, so we can get into the conversation part. I'm going to stop there with that. So there's a legacy of what this is and how important it is. Come on and shift. Where's the computer? There we go. And that's the project that I just showed you. One of the things that came out, there was the chair that was being wielded. And one of the memes that came out quickly was that Nathaniel Alexander was in the long historical lineage of the invention of the folding chair, that Nathaniel Alexander was a Black man involved in that scientific lineage of the folding chair, which you're going to see in something else I'm going to show you in a minute. So I just wanted to, we're not doing any questions yet. Hold on. Now let me show the other part I want to show you, which is where my curiosity and research lies. Hold on one second. Because that's the other major part of the presentation, and then I'm going to be able to open it up to discussion. All right, so, all right, back to share screen. Okay, so it's kind of more of like a convenience. You should be able to see my screen. So cascading down are hundreds of these across, down, up, these images. And they could be Instagram, they could be TikTok. And what you see are just, some are, just absolute Black joy. Some are an articulation of the resistance. But it's these images of seeing Black people and others, I should say, as you can see on the screen, from a social agency perspective, selling mugs, making T-shirts, using rap and rhyme, using analytical analysis, telling funny stories to kind of illuminate, using humor oftentimes and a lot of other things, like a Black joy response, not in a uniform kind of a way, to Black people not being killed in an assault that we are so used to historically and at present as a larger body of African people. And to see, number one, it was recorded and sent across, the internet, but to see us live, to see that Black men swim, the women join in, the chanting, the 3 or 4 men and women, some of which were skipping to save each other, is a phenomenon that I think we need to talk more about. And so if you have TikTok, and if you put in, as I have, and I've watched probably about 200 of these, and as academics, we start to put things in categories and organize them. T-shirts, mugs, humor, poetry, spoken word, blues, jazz, first-person accounts, narratives. They're just all over the place. And I think they are worthy of looking at the expressions of Black joy, humor, a serious critical analyses. And what it did for me is that, and I want to start to take questions now. What it did for me is that it underscored for me why we have to be connected to the technology, because the old ways of gathering to do it, particularly in a post-COVID world, weren't available. My whole mood and affect brightened by seeing hundreds of these, oftentimes younger people, engaged in this back and forth kind of tete-a-tete. I'm going to stop there. And that's the rationale for the research. It's it's to use electronic medium to discover, recover, to talk about, Black joy in this regards, and young people are doing it all the time. So I'm working on the formal writing and presentation to chronicle the categories, to look at it as others have in a historical context. But also, I mean, I'm a teacher, so to look at, well, how might we use it in the classroom? How is it a newer and better way to kind of engage? I'm interested in teaching young people about the history where you can use mixed methods, and I'm going to take questions now, but it's also, it helped me with my mood to be connected to the community. And I noticed in the real world, in the ground world that I lived in, there wasn't as many dialogues that I was having. I don't see ground people as much as I used to anyway. And being engaged online, I'm laughing, to myself. I'm connected. I'm talking to other people in social media. You get to post. Let me bring in Brother Dr. Kalfani Touré. And again, welcome to Widener. If you weren't on, I welcomed you officially in the beginning of the presentation. Welcome, brother. How you doing?
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. And I heard the welcome, and greetings to everyone assembled here. My comment and question is really quick. I used to think that these sort of Pyrrhic victories were defeating because in the grand scheme of things, African Americans and other people of color are continuing to lose sort of this contest, this war. But this reminded me, and your presentation also reminded me of how important it is to sneak away or steal away little moments of joy. And so I thank you for that. I do have a question, which is to ask, did you see this same sort of euphoria in the Black Lives Movement when African Americans were able to convince allies of different ethnic and racial groups to join the fight against white supremacy?
Yeah. Oh man. And you and I are going to have lunch or dinner or whatever and talk about this for 4 hours. But two things. So we've seen ebbs and flow, 400 plus years of being Africans in America, 400 plus in terms of the oppression, before that, as others have written about it now. So we see this ebbs and flows. The constancy is their pathology, and their mania, their hatred. Now, I'm saying as a culture, people, I gave my disclaimers in the beginning of the presentation. I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about from a dominant discourse kind of a take. So the Black Lives Matter movement, when you look at, social movements and Black people, it is one of hundreds, many, in a continuum. And so there have been white supporters. I tend not to use the word ally, and I'm going to tell you why. I tend not to call myself an ally, although I'm in favor of a lot of other movements, because I think people do little work, they get a sticker, and then all of a sudden they're an ally and they're not even doing real work. You know what I mean? I don't call myself an ally, although if we're talking about women or queer or like whatever, I'm in the fight and I'm endorsing, but I don't put an ally sticker on my door. I just don't do it. Because I want people in that community to say, oh, Richard, he's a warrior. Oh, he's doing the work. I don't need a sticker. I don't want a sticker. I don't need it under my name. I just need to do the work and to get the work done. So because then when people have the sticker and they obviously don't know stuff, or they're obviously, extremely bigoted or biased, I'm like, what are you doing with the sticker? So I don't make that mistake myself. I don't put the sticker under my name so that when I make a mistake and I still make them, people don't have to say, well, darn, I thought Richard knew. No, we're all struggling to unlearn this kind of stuff. The other part of your question, so hopefully I answered your question. It's the other thing, Brother Kalfani, I'm old, so it's hard for me sometimes to see victories. And in the book, when she talks about, no, you must take moments to have joy, because otherwise, when you're a Black woman or you're Black anywhere, PWI, you'll be like, damn, again, and you'll be so upset. And if you don't take these moments, and here's a woman that wrote a book when her family members were killed, not the idea of them being killed, not identifying because we're Black, and we've seen that before. No, her actual family, her parents missed being killed in the very groceries in the very church, because the church instituted new precautions of locked doors and cameras that saved people in the church. So the gunman in his heinous efforts to kill Black people went to the grocery store and shot people there. And if she can find joy, and she juxtaposes it, Brother Kalfani, because I needed it too, she juxtaposes it in a long, ongoing history of struggle where it can be hard for Black people to be joyful about anything when I have to turn on a TV screen, showing us being killed regularly, or now in social media. And so by underscoring the opportunity, the instances where we do it, I think for me, it gives us a better quality of life. And it also lets us know that, not everything is bad. My last comment, and then other people throw in with questions or comments or remarks, I need to check the chat as well. Oftentimes, like if people want to call themselves an ally, I'm going to give you one. You meet that standard, then you're an ally. John Brown. When you're like John Brown and you do what John Brown did, you're like, he took on a war and said, you know what, as a Christian, I think it's wrong what you're doing to Black people. I'm going to get a gun. I'm going to go fight. And this is, hundreds of years ago, but I'm going to go actually and fight in the system on behalf of what I think is wrong. If you're going to meet the John Brown standard, okay, you're going to fight on that level, then you put anything you want underneath your name. And like I said, I think I'm a serious supporter, but I don't need to put ally under my name for other people to see it. I need to just do the work. Questions, reactions. What was the moment like? Thank you. I needed a question. Carly, jump in there. And good to see you. And thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cooper. I can tell you that I've been excited about this conversation since I saw the flyer. I wanted to find out if you would speak a little bit more to that, even the disclaimer that you gave before starting this presentation, that generally you may live, with values of nonviolence and whatnot, but being able to find the joy in these moments of resistance, in moments where we otherwise could very potentially and likely see tragedy and death for our communities. How do you find joy in that? But most specifically, I'm thinking about the reactions within the Black community, which we know is not a monolith, and some of the reactions to our reactions on social media. I saw this when the Queen passed and there were folks affected by colonialism that made jokes out of it, made memes, made light of the situation while others were grieving. I saw it in this conversation with Montgomery, where again, maybe in your typical role as a social worker or something else, you may not promote violence, and still we're delighted in this brawl and the outcome of Black folks sticking together to support each other. Could you speak to some of that a little bit more, about the joy in experiencing joy and us giving ourselves permission to, in ways that may offend or activate other communities outside of us, right?
Yeah, and I gave 2 minutes on being centered. Oftentimes we're centered in Eurocentric paradigms and worldview when we teach theory. We just don't know it. We don't critique it, decolonize. We just don't critique it from that perspective. So much of our existence has aligned us, historically, culturally, with people who have harmed us. We favor the founding so-called fathers, but we, even today, if we call them, slave owning, misogynistic, anti-women, folks, and some people get mad when you're just simply telling the truth. It's a radical act, in my opinion, in this country, to just simply be alive and to be Black. And so the mere expressions of us living our lives for some historically in the present has been threatening. And so certainly when we are, and again, I use Malcolm, when Malcolm, there is a picture with Malcolm with a gun. Malcolm never fired a bullet to my knowledge, at least, after he became enlightened. I don't know what he did in the pre-enlightened Malcolm days, but so for Black people to just, let's look at what we didn't do in that instance. We didn't kill anybody. We killed no one. We didn't go and get guns and shoot. We didn't loot. We didn't stab. We didn't murder anybody when maybe at least the actual perpetrators, it might have been justifiable. Black people protecting themselves oftentimes is critiqued and over criticized by a world and a worldview that barely lets us, live barely lets us discuss reparations or any other thing that seems too radical. So for me, and Carly, you said it well. You know, I understand that the environment that I'm from southeastern Pennsylvania of like 60, 70 years ago. And some of the very things that I'm saying now would be too radical for my Black, you know, relatives. Baby, you know, just pray for them. Yeah, I'm gonna pray for them, but they're trying to kill me. And I got some other ideas when people are trying to kill me. So we have to look at the socializing role of Dr. Lachey Harvey, you're on deck. We have to look at the socializing role of Africana studies and how it's not just about the knowledge and the information. We can't treat African American studies just as an intellectual pursuit. We have to look at, you know, socializing and re-socializing. We have to look at how people have been, in part, you know, ruining a culture, in part, because there are good things to it too, ruining a culture by being unable to identify with our own Black existence. So hopefully I answered your questions, Dr. Lachey Harvey, and thank you for coming.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. Great day to you all. My comment is somewhat, I think, a bridge between your conversation right now about what it means to be socialized and some part of Carly's question about reveling in. Carly, that's my interpretation of your question, the reveling in, because something has shook me to my core probably in the past year, is how even if you are experiencing joy intentionally, organically, as a Black person, that there are other Black people who will then see you as a threat because you are being so gay and so light, and not acknowledging that we are under attack and that death is imminent, and you know, on and on and on. It's almost as if I don't know that I can have that homegirl or that homeboy be in my crew if they're always so full of joy, and that even that becomes a version of policing. Is how can you make sure that your joy is for you and not for everyone else, right? Not an external celebration, lest you be seen as a threat to your community. And that's only, again, that only showed up kind of in my life and in my work in the past few years. Is like, it could be, you know, born of COVID. There could be many things that have allowed me to see that there are folks who are averse to Black people experiencing joy as a practice. And that thus makes you almost someone who has to be kept at a distance. And so it's just something I'm mulling, and this is a great place for me to kind of play with that. So, you know, address it if you want to, or however you so choose. Yeah.
Yeah, two words: internalized oppression. We've been taught to hate ourselves. You know, we've been taught to hate ourselves. And I would argue, you know, not that you can always quantify it, but Black women even more. You know, like, you know, body type, hair texture, size, but you know, like all these other, you know, skin tone, blah 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 blah. So it's a strata, and you know, for us, for me, it's not an intellectual concept. It's real. It's people suffering. What's it, Audrey Chapman's book on trauma, on Black historical trauma. It's day-to-day suffering that gets misdiagnosed in the Eurocentric newsology that I teach for a living, the DSM 45 or 49 or 42 RB, you know, because what is not oftentimes considered there are the cultural realities experienced by, you know, again, we're talking about African people in here, but I'm, you know, Latinx, Irish, you know, I mean, we can queer, I mean, we can broaden the scope of this to understand that you can't just have a newsology with the history that discipline has had, and how it has harmed so-called people of difference and constructed this ideal, you know, this so-called ideal, where if you don't fit into that, you know, historical, you know, kind of axiom of like thinking and cognition and whatever, you are being harmed. But the problem is oftentimes you're being harmed and you are being given you're assigned pathology. And so, you know, when I attempt to teach this to students, you know, I say to students, I'm going to do two things when I teach this stuff to you. I'm going to teach it because you have to know, because you're going to have to pass any licensing exam. So first, I'm going to teach it from the perspective of value. And then the second perspective I'm going to teach it from is I'm going to tear it apart. I'm going to teach you how to critique it, and I'm going to teach you how to use it and disavow the parts of it that aren't useful. Dr. Lola Ames.
I just
You're up. You are muted though.
I'm in the library, and I just wanted to say this, is that as you think about it, yes, there was Black joy in the entire in the episode in itself. But what floored me was when people who were not people of color, there was that need to explain to me what happened. But then for me, it was like, if I have to explain it to you, if I have to explain the response, then therefore you're not meant to understand it. And that's all I wanted to say, is that so many times we're asked to explain our behavior on things, and it's difficult. Not difficult, but I don't have the energy. So that's all I had to say. All right.
Yeah, and sometimes, sadly, if you want me to be really honest, sometimes I don't have the energy to explain it to Black folks, which was Dr. Harvey's point. Like sometimes my own so-called people, air quotes, and sometimes, just to make this other point again, so that, folks that may have missed it, there were many people on the social media platforms that I used on TikTok that were white that got it, that understood it. Like, let me be clear, like understood it. So if they want to have Ale under their name, cool. I told you I don't, but they get it. Let me just hit the chat real quick. Darren Tolliver, I find Black joy in perpetual resilience. Dama Walton, is it possible to send you a question by email? Oh, no, I'm not taking them. But the only weapon, the folding chair, like so many examples. Black entrepreneurship, like people were selling mugs, cups. I had a student that gave me, I told her I would pay for it. She's like, no, I was like, I can't take gifts from students. So I'm still giving her money, but she created a folding chair thing and gave it to me last week in class when she heard the talk. I was like, you're selling these, right? She said, I'm gonna give you one. I said, teachers can't take gifts. But there's like a movement of like these cookies, entrepreneurship, t-shirts, and I just mean, they just seem like some of these folks were not in business, prior to this, but had an idea. And again, when you saw the TikTok or Instagram platform, they're all over the place. Tracy Jones, we came together. I wish I had more time to talk about it. Black people are surprised when Black people come together. That's institutionalized oppression. Black people, me, was happy. Me, doing what I do for a living, knowing what I know for a living. When I see a young brother dive in to go help, I'm like, whoa, wow. He jumped into, and I'm not calling him Aquaman. I'm going to call him an Orisha, from Africa. You know what I mean? I ain't calling him Aquaman. We got enough Aquaman frame of reference. I'm going to say Wakanda. He jumped in the water from Wakanda. Black people in movie. Remember, it wasn't that long when the Wakanda films came out, the new one, and people wearing clothing and taking each other and seeing it 3 times and whatever. We look for ways to be communal. We often don't get those. What we get are the Friday night, Saturday, Monday morning news about 8 Black people killed other Black people, and we're like, damn, there we go again. Because we have internalized that presentation of ourselves, and we actually buy it as if it's the only presentation that exists. We came together to defend a Black man who we saw being attacked, and that was beautiful. And I'm an African-American Christian. Now we African-American women are learning to love ourselves, our lips, our hair, our stories. Black Girl Magic. I mean, there have been books last 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, where Black women and others are writing these kind of books that need to be the primer in African-American studies, as far as I'm concerned, not just the intellectual, historical ones. Coming back to Dr. Ames, to answer Carly's question, I was teaching the course that the brother is teaching now in African-American history, and I did a social deconstruction of, wait a minute, can we talk about Black pain? Can we look at the legacy of Great Britain and what it has done historically to so-called third world countries and so-called air quote third world people? And let's look at the actual history that they've written about the subjugation, the oppression, the colonialization, the working people to death. They're like, let's look at, and then you're going to talk to me about someone that makes a joke about something that's using it as a context for remembering their own historical oppression as a people. Like, what are you talking about? The problem is so many times that people haven't been taught the truth or the greater version of history, that they don't have a frame of reference. And I said to my students, so when you don't know what you don't have, you see a person of color making fun of an elderly woman dying, it appears cruel and insensitive, but it also shows that you don't have another frame of reference to understand the greater subtle, kind of point that's being made here. And that's the problem. Jump back in there, Dr. Ames, if you still had a question, or others. We got about 3 minutes left. So this was meant to be a tip of the iceberg. One of the things that bothers me about being an academic is that we got to wait 4 years before we talk about a phenomena because it's been studied and written about. I was like, no, we need to be in forums, and we teach young people, we teach older people, we teach night students, we teach day students, continuing adult learners. We need to, particularly, I think, in African American studies and social work, which is my other discipline, which is my home discipline, we need to figure out in what spaces, when and where we can engage and to talk about this kind of thing, and then tie it into the historical knowledge and legacy that we want to always continue to enlighten and to promulgate them with. Any other, got about a minute left, and literally in a minute, I'm in another meeting. I'm not there, but I will be there in about a minute. So I promise you, so I wanted to kick this one off because, one, I couldn't find somebody that was going to present it, except there were a couple of people that we could have paid $10,000, but we didn't have the $10,000 to pay them. I wanted the author of that book and 2 or 3 other people from Boston University, as I mentioned, and they were like, oh, I mean, I'd love to do it. It'd be about $5,000 for an hour. That's not going to happen. At least not right now. It's not going to happen, not in this hour. So I want to thank all of you for coming out. We hope to do, I've been trying to get some of the people out of Philly, some of the real people out of Philly, 50 years in hip hop. I mean, some of the real people, like some of the performers who are still alive. I've been trying to get them on the mic to do an Ngoma conversation. And I'm like, you're already a millionaire. Just talk for half an hour. Talk about, Black women in hip hop, in Philly, 40 years ago. So actually, I have a couple of people that may actually do it. And I mentioned if you haven't joined our email, our group, Ngoma Conversations, shoot me an email and I will add you. But that is one of the other areas. And then we're always open to suggestions. So it is now 1 o'clock. I'm physically walking over to another building for another meeting that I'm looking forward to. But we have to get over there. Thanks so much for coming. Join the group, make suggestions. Really good seeing everybody. Again, I see hands waving, particularly if you got your video on. Thanks for coming. If you got your video off, thanks for coming as well. Take care, everybody. Have a good day. See you the 3rd Monday of the month next month, where I'm still confirming a speaker, hopefully on hip hop.